Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Hope you enjoy. Tree Dwellers, written by Bo Woodstock. Scanning the cafeteria, I left the credit check area. I spotted a waving hand and nodded in satisfaction. I'd only been an exchange student at Mars Technical University for one of their months, as they called it, but happily, I'd already found acceptance. Like my people, the Zisqua, humans also found that sharing mealtimes together enhanced social bonding, and this particular human, by the name of David, had insisted that I keep joining his table on the days we shared the same schedule. It was clear that a friendship was building, something that I had no complaints about. "Gone! Glad you can make it." Dave smiled at me, and as I approached, "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, baring the lower row of my teeth in reply. As is often the case when new people meet, there was a very unfortunate misunderstanding when humanity met us almost a century ago. What ensued could barely be called a war, though many lives were lost, before cooler heads prevailed and the prospective diplomats of each race finally achieved a peaceful resolution. One of the first established protocols was an exchange of language, including that of facial and body language. While the gesture had first been unnerving, it very quickly became apparent that there were equivalent translations that could be made. The Zisqua were also primates, though we had retained our fur coats through evolution and had much the same range of facial expressions. It honestly wasn't that difficult to accept once you got used to them, particularly after 50 years of the Alliance. Now, young Zisqua were being taught not only the equivalent human expressions, but Terran Standard was quickly becoming accepted as a second language to be taught as early as stage 1 schooling. "So," Dave continued, once I'd found my seat, "how did that trip to Earth go last week? It's been a while since I was home. Always miss it, but I'm curious to see what a visitor thinks. Did you learn anything interesting?"
"It was incredible," I nodded. "So many museums and preserved relics from the advancement of technology. I particularly enjoyed, what were they called? The Baikonur Cosmodrome and the Kennedy Space Center. It first steps of humans into space. Incredible that occurred even though humans were not united at the time."
"Yes," Dave laughed. "Not the best time in our history, certainly, but it isn't important to remember the past."
"You know,"
I said, poking at my salad with a fork,
"it is interesting you say that. See, while we were there, in this city of New York, we encountered a group of humans that were, well, not happy to see us. The exchange group, I mean, kept calling us names and bestial primates in your world, calling us tree dwellers, telling us to go back to the tree world. Seemed to still be angry about the great misunderstanding at first contact."
David's face fell. "I think I know the kind you're talking about. I'm sorry you had to experience that. I hope no one was hurt."
"No, thankfully." I shook my head. "They were just noisy and rude, said a lot of hostile words, but appeared too afraid to approach us directly. Not that I'm complaining, but it's strange. Our people have been allies now for so long. Why would any of us wish them harm?"
"Well, it might have something to do with the fact that you're all at least a head taller than us," David laughed. "No one wants to pick a fight with a Wookiee. Do you know—"
"Of course." I shook my head with amusement. "Enough of your culture has made its way to us to understand that particular association. There are worse fictional characters to be compared with."
"Okay, good," David nodded. "Actually great. That's a classic piece of human media."
"Right," I replied. "I would be interested in seeing more of it, by the way. Back to that encounter, though. There was one thing that confused me. Several of the humans kept yelling their persistence would win in the end. What in the stars is that about?"
"Oh, you got one of the special groups." David shook his head, half in amusement, half in exasperation. At my confused look, he sighed and rolled his eyes. "All right, get comfortable. Keep eating. This might take a while. What you experienced is, in my opinion, one of the worst and also best things about us humans. We don't let go of the past."
"I saw that," I nodded. "All the museums. I don't see how that's a bad thing."
"No," David shook his head. "Those museums are history, which is obviously similar to the past, but not the same. To explain what they were saying," David again rolled his eyes, I'm annoyed, by the way, because the entire reason I know this stuff is due to how much those types won't shut up about it. Basically, they're hung up on the fact that way in our past, before even metalworking was discovered, humans hunted with something called persistence hunting and throwing rocks, as if it makes us superior in some way. They all say almost exactly the same thing. I'll bet that's somewhere in those blogs or solo websites where people read and talk about it endlessly, because they won't drop the point. I mean, how else would some random person on the street know that particular term? It's not like it comes up in conversation daily. You following so far? I motioned with a hand for him to continue, as I had just taken a massive bite out of a sandwich. Okay, he continued. Anyway, this is what I mean when they won't let go of the past. They will read and talk about anything that matches their worldview, like a giant echo chamber. They'll learn all things about our past, such as why we have fingernails instead of claws, why we only have hair on our heads, why we call the Earth the Earth. They'll also find places where, in their opinion, humanity was great, and claim that we need to return to things the good old days, learning almost as much as some professional anthropologists do. Note, I'd say almost, because they only learn selectively, trumping up the facts that they like, conveniently forgetting the ones they don't.
I can see how that's dangerous, I nodded, pausing to take a bite before continuing. It's impossible to advance if you're being held back. Something you might find amusing. It's also an insult in my society to call someone a tree dweller. Counterintuitive, right?
It is, David agreed, raising an eyebrow. I mean, from what I understand, all of your cities are built on massive canopies of your world's forests, right? Aren't your people still primarily arboreal?
I nodded. We are. By the way, we see it. We live in the trees still, but we don't dwell there. We are no longer afraid to descend to the forest floor as our ancestors were. That was our first step, you know, the first squaw to overcome their fear and see what lay beneath the safety of the canopy was a pioneer, as without them we would not have discovered the arts of metalworking, and you know how it goes from there. Dwelling in the trees forever would mean that we would never have left, never advancing to where we are today. Anyway, these people that confronted us, they seemed like real tree dwellers to me.
I think you're right, David nodded. As I said, they cling to the past, but don't learn the lessons that it teaches. That's what history is about, taking everything, even the parts that you don't like, and learning from it. Recognizing what to be proud of, what to be ashamed of, and advancing from there without making the same mistakes.
Indeed. Speaking of which, I noticed the wall chrono behind him. I know that the transport tube to the engineering wing usually gets crowded around this time. I was almost late last week, not making that mistake again. Until next time,
always have a good rest of your day. End of story. Story number 2. The Creature in the Sun, written by Erebos Yeet. The creature in the sun was a simple fact. It was as fundamental as life and death itself. It was and would always be. Call it a god, call it an apex predator. Doesn't matter, it simply is. We first laid witness to it when it destroyed the Gandan Empire. They were the greatest of species, successfully having colonized 6 different solar systems. They dared to venture to a 7th as soon as they landed their first ship. It happened. It clawed out of the biggest sun we had ever discovered. His fiery fingers were bigger than most of our planets. He slowly arose from a solar storm and finally freed. It opened its flaming wings, showcasing a tremendous terror the universe had in store. The Gandans didn't stand a chance. 7 planets razed to the ground in equally as many days. Not a single soul survived. After that, the creature simply returned home. 2 more species tried to colonize a 7th planet. Both were swiftly dealt with. They tried to fight it, having prepared to defend against it for centuries. The flaming monstrosity didn't even notice, and erased them from existence. Seemingly, to make sure no civilization would ever forget, the creature made one flight every 150 years, destroying just 1 planet. Never a very important one, but just important enough for us to remember, for us to fear. so the creature came to be. To many it became a god, to others it was simply an enforcer of a universal rule. They called it many different things, and tried to please it in many different ways. Nobody even thought about resisting it anymore. It was deemed inevitable. Then came the humans. When they first noticed the different species greeted them like they would any new civilization. They exchanged information, established possible trading routes, and warned them of the universal rule. The humans proved to be quite skeptical little buggers. Every scientific fact we graciously had enlightened them with, they tried to disprove. Every history they verified, every friendship made, was tested. The biggest fact they faced was, of course, the universal rule. It was a rule unbroken. To us, this would make it the truth. To them, it was a challenge. It was a hot summer night when we noticed. First came the warnings of solar storms, then came the footage. It was monstrous. We all saw it. We saw our universe shatter. The creature fighting for its life. The humans never broke its rule. Instead, they came for its home directly. A black hole triggered within the biggest star in existence. The creature resisted, but it didn't matter. Just as easily as it had destroyed the Godheads, the humans had destroyed it. The creature in the sun was no more. All that remained was darkness. The reaction was mixed, irrational even. Some species were angry. They feared some kind of divine redemption on all life. Some species were scared of the humans. Most of them were scared now, actually, including me. I was the first in command of the Dentarons at the time. Being traded partners and perhaps even friends, we felt obliged to contact them. Yet I had no idea what could be said. Eventually, I asked them 2 words. What now? They responded not just to us, but to all known species in the galaxy. It didn't make much sense to us at the time, but the words are, to this day, known by just about everyone. It became so important. It is still the slogan of the new Interplanetary Federation. God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. Must we ourselves not become gods? End of story. I would quickly like to thank our Tier 5 patrons and channel members: Casper Arnholt, Cam Maxwell, it's difficult to pronounce, Lord Arishikal, Dragzoon WRE, and Arcadian. Thank you very much.